When my former spouse convinced the court I was emotionally unstable until my child's recording transformed everything. The instant my ex-husband gazed directly at the magistrate and declared, "She's mentally unbalanced. She fabricates stories to our daughter. I'm requesting complete guardianship." I experienced a sensation of breathlessness. He articulated it with such composure as though stating an indisputable fact. And the magistrate? Her expression suggested she accepted his claims. I attempted to vocalize something. I wanted to yell, weep, offer some explanation, but my voice failed me. I remained immobile, pulse racing, frozen in that uncomfortable courtroom seat, while the person who once professed devotion to me characterized me as hazardous to the individual I cherish above all else. My child. Emma was seated behind me, clasping my mother's palm. Though merely 7 years old, she observed everything transpiring. Her expansive hazel eyes connected with mine. She could perceive it. She could sense it. I was metaphorically suffocating, and nobody was offering assistance. Victor, my former spouse, was attired in a dark blue business suit, as if preparing for a professional presentation. Composed, polished, impeccably practiced. The identical individual who previously shouted at me in our vehicle over an incorrect takeaway order now sat before a magistrate appearing as the embodiment of responsibility. He was engaging. He consistently had been. That constituted the difficulty. The magistrate inquired if I had any response. I parted my lips, but only a tremulous exhalation emerged. My legal representative glanced in my direction, wordless. The courtroom was utterly silent. My hands quivered. I was on the verge of losing custody of my child, and it seemed no one could discern the actual circumstances. Then I heard a voice, diminutive, lucid, and unwavering from behind me. "Your Honor, I brought a recording from Dad's mobile device. I believe you should view it." Everything halted. The gallery turned. The officer appeared bewildered. Victor's complexion drained of pigment, and for the initial time that morning, Judge Harmon displayed astonishment. Emma rose, still holding her rosy school tablet with both hands. She wasn't tearful. She wasn't frightened. She appeared more courageous than I'd ever witnessed. She proceeded toward the front, beyond the wooden benches, past the man attempting to separate her from me, and presented the judge with her tablet. I wasn't even aware she had it with her. I was unaware what she had recorded. I didn't even realize she knew how to capture recordings on Victor's mobile, but I recognized something had just shifted. The judge accepted the tablet. "What is this?" she asked. Emma's voice was gentle yet confident. "From last weekend. Dad said those things when I was supposed to be sleeping, but I wasn't. I overheard him when he was really angry. And I thought if you didn't believe Mom, perhaps you'd believe him." My heart fractured. My daughter had accomplished what I couldn't. She stood firm. She articulated the truth. And abruptly, the courtroom, the location where I felt most insignificant, belonged to her. Prior to the courtroom, before the suit and the silence and the judge's unfriendly gaze before the recording, there was simply us. Myself and Emma. Our flat wasn't spacious. It contained 2 bedrooms, 1 washroom, and the type of creaky flooring that groaned whenever you traversed them after 10 in the evening. But Emma didn't mind. She adored it. She referred to it as our sanctuary. She remarked that the rosy curtains in her room made it appear like the interior of a cotton candy formation. Most evenings, she'd recline on her mattress with her plush seal, Pebbles, and request me to read 2 narratives instead of 1. I invariably agreed. I operated from home as an independent visual designer, which generated just sufficient income to maintain our lifestyle. My mother, Helen, resided a few blocks away and assisted with watching Emma when I had deadlines. She's the variety of mother who doesn't always communicate appropriately, but invariably appears when needed. She'd deliver homemade pasta unannounced, cleanse my washroom when I wasn't observing, and inform me, "You're performing better than you perceive, Sophia." And for a duration, I trusted her. Emma was 7, intelligent, compassionate, and perceptive in manners that caused adults discomfort. She posed inquiries that forced reconsideration before dishonesty. She once discovered me weeping in the kitchen late at night and remained quiet. She merely brought over her coverlet and draped it around my shoulders. That characterized the type of child she embodied. Our preferred activity was the honesty container. I initiated it when Victor and I initially separated. I explained that any time she possessed a question or desired to discuss something confusing or alarming, she could document it and place it in the container. We'd examine 1 note together each night. Some were frivolous. "Why do individuals snore?" Others penetrated deeply. "Will Dad cease loving me if I remain with you?" I told her the truth, consistently, regardless of how painful it was. The divorce hadn't been amicable. Victor desired authority more than he wanted guardianship. He consented to shared custody on documents, but in actuality, he pushed for more. He questioned every parental decision I made, criticized what I provided for meals, complained if I collected her 2 minutes tardy. And during his weekends, Emma would return withdrawn and hushed. Sometimes she wouldn't communicate with me whatsoever. Until Tuesday. I mentioned it in court, but Victor knew how to present himself. He was a previous university athlete turned marketing executive, the kind who made individuals laugh and remembered everyone's name. He wore self-assurance like a secondary skin. In public, he was entirely affable. In private, he could erupt over spilled beverage or a missing charger. I maintained records. I documented everything. Electronic communications, messages. I possessed a folder full of texts where he accused me of being unstable, where he employed language no child should hear their father use regarding their mother. But I never revealed those to Emma. I believed I was shielding her. One evening, following a particularly tense exchange, Emma inquired if I ever became frightened around Daddy. I paused. She gazed down at her cereal and stated, "I do, but I think I'm not supposed to mention that." That night, I couldn't slumber. I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I had disappointed her by not contesting more vigorously, by attempting too diligently to maintain tranquility. A few weeks afterward, Victor filed for full custody. He claimed I was emotionally damaging Emma, that I misled her about him, that I couldn't provide constancy. His attorney submitted declarations claiming I was erratic, undependable, and mentally unsuitable to co-parent. When I read those documents, my hands trembled. I had to sit on the floor. Helen sat beside me, grasped my wrist, and stated, "You possess the truth. That's adequate." I wanted to believe her. But in court, truth isn't resounding. It's concealed in evidence and twisted into strategy. Victor's attorney portrayed an image of a woman deteriorating. My attorney instructed me not to become emotional, not to speak unless questioned, not to interrupt. But internally, I was screaming. Emma observed it all. Every tear I attempted to conceal. Every instance I whispered, "It's going to be all right," even when I wasn't certain it would be. I didn't realize she was observing that attentively. I didn't know she was listening. I didn't know she was planning anything whatsoever. She was merely 7, yet somehow she comprehended what none of us had vocalized. She understood truth mattered, and she recognized the court needed to witness it firsthand. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. I barely slept the previous night. Emma had fallen asleep clutching Pebbles, her plush seal, and I sat beside her bed until sunrise, just watching her. My chest felt oppressive, as though something was compressing it. I knew this wasn't merely a legal matter, it was a struggle for her existence as she understood it, for the one thing I had invested every fragment of myself into safeguarding. That morning, my mom accompanied us. She wore her special scarf, the silky one she only utilized when she required courage. I believe she recognized I didn't possess much remaining within me. Emma wore a turquoise dress with daisies on it and packed her school tablet in her backpack as she habitually did. She didn't communicate much in the vehicle, she merely gazed out the window, humming a melody I didn't identify. When we entered the courthouse, Victor was already present. He was wearing the identical dark blue suit he wore to our wedding preparation dinner. Only this instance, there was no warmth behind his smile, just calculation. His attorney stood alongside him, clipboard in grasp, impeccably groomed, conversing in subdued tones that sounded rehearsed. Victor turned and observed me, then Emma. He smiled and waved as though nothing was amiss. Emma didn't reciprocate the wave. The courtroom felt like a theatrical setting, everything polished and frigid. My name was on the schedule. Victor's, too. But the individual being evaluated wasn't merely me. It was the version of me he had created on paper. When Judge Harmon entered, the room descended into a quiet tension. She was tall, middle-aged, and didn't squander time. She gazed directly at Victor's attorney and stated, "You may commence." His lawyer began depicting the scenario immediately. He characterized Victor as a stable father. He referenced his consistent employment, his orderly residence, his endeavors to shield Emma from Sophia's emotional unpredictability. He presented messages between Victor and me extracted completely out of context. In one, I informed Victor I was overwhelmed and fatigued. He framed that as evidence of mental instability. In another, I requested him not to elevate his voice around Emma. That was distorted into a claim that I was controlling and manipulative. I sat there while the person I had once shared a life with transformed everything I'd ever said into ammunition. Victor added his own voice when questioned. "She's not well," he said, composed and collected. "She informs our daughter I'm the antagonist. She bewilders her. She makes Emma afraid of me. I don't want to take her away out of malice. I'm doing this to protect her." Protect her? That word impacted me like a blow. Judge Harmon gazed at me. "Ms. Reynolds, do you have a response?" I parted my lips, but nothing emerged. The words were in my chest, pounding to be released. But my voice betrayed me. My heart raced. My tongue felt burdensome. All I could do was glance over at Emma, who sat behind me, her small legs swinging off the bench. She gave me a look I'd never forget. Concerned, but not fearful. My attorney cleared his throat and offered a feeble response about my emotional resilience and how overwhelm is a natural component of single parenting. It wasn't sufficient. It didn't scratch the surface of what was genuinely occurring. No one mentioned the occasion Victor cursed at me on the telephone while Emma was in the room. No one inquired why Emma started bedwetting again after his weekends. None of that was incorporated into their version of the narrative. The judge nodded slightly, writing notes, and then Victor stood again and stated, "Your Honor, I want full custody. I believe my daughter is being emotionally harmed, and I don't think shared custody is in her best interest anymore." I felt the barriers closing in. My breath shortened. My hands clenched the arms of my chair. I glanced at Emma again, uncertain how I could protect her from what was unfolding directly in front of her. That's when Emma released my mom's hand, stood up, and walked forward. She didn't request permission. She didn't hesitate. "Your Honor," she said, "I brought a recording from Dad's phone. I think you should see it." The room became still. Victor's face turned expressionless. My mom gasped. I turned in my seat, eyes wide. Emma stood there, holding her school tablet, shoulders square, voice steady. Judge Harmon looked at her. "Excuse me." Emma held the tablet up a little higher. "It's from last weekend. He didn't know I was awake, but I was. I heard what he said, and I thought it might matter." No one spoke. Not Victor, not his lawyer, not the judge. And for the first time since the hearing began, I sensed something shift. Emma had brought more than a recording. She had brought the truth into the room, and everyone perceived it. Emma stood in the center of the courtroom, holding her tablet like it was a shield. Her daisy dress appeared a size too small, the hem grazing her knees, but she didn't fidget. She didn't look back for reassurance. She stood alone, confronting the judge. "I brought a recording from Dad's phone," she said again. "I think you should see it." Judge Harmon glanced at the bailiff. "Bring it here," she said. Emma walked the few steps forward and handed the device to the bailiff, who then gave it to the judge. The silence extended across the room like a taut rope. Victor's jaw was set, his lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. His lawyer looked from him to the tablet and back again. Neither of them moved. The judge turned the screen toward herself and tapped the play button. For a moment there was nothing, just the sound of ambient noise, the kind of distant hum you hear late at night when the world outside has gone quiet. Then came his voice. Loud, harsh, not the smooth, composed tone he had used just minutes earlier in court. It was unmistakably Victor. He was shouting, "You think you're so clever, huh? Go ahead. Try telling anyone. See what happens. You'll end up residing in some foster home. And don't think your precious mother can rescue you. She's pathetic." A chair scraped. A plate clattered. Emma's voice, quiet and frightened, whispered, "I'm sorry." He interrupted her. "Don't talk back. You're fortunate I even permit you to visit. If you say a word to her, I swear." The judge hit pause. She didn't say anything immediately. She just sat there, staring at the frozen screen. Victor shifted in his seat. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something rapidly and alarmed, but the judge raised her hand to silence him. "Where did this originate from?" she asked, her voice level. Emma answered without hesitation. "He left his phone on the sofa. I heard him shouting. I wanted to record it. I was scared. But I thought if someone heard it, maybe they'd believe me. And Mom." My chest tightened. My daughter had been scared. She had formulated a plan, and she had executed it with more courage than most adults I know. I wanted to run to her, wrap my arms around her, tell her she should never have had to do any of this. But I remained in my seat because this moment belonged to her. Victor spoke up, his voice suddenly forced and defensive. "Your Honor, that recording is taken completely out of context. I was disciplining her. She was misbehaving and—" "Enough," the judge said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Victor stopped speaking immediately. Judge Harmon turned to Emma. "Thank you for being brave," she said. "You can return to your seat." Emma nodded and walked back, her steps slower now, the weight of the moment beginning to show in her shoulders. My mother pulled her into her lap and held her tightly. The judge looked at me. "Ms. Reynolds, do you have anything else to add?" This time I found my voice. "No, Your Honor. I think my daughter expressed it all." The judge nodded once, then leaned back in her chair. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked across the courtroom. "In light of this evidence, I'm calling for an immediate review of all custody arrangements. Until that is completed, full temporary custody will be granted to Ms. Reynolds. Supervised visitation only for Mr. Blake. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Blake from the courtroom until further notice." Victor stood, stunned. "You can't be serious." "Sir," the bailiff said, stepping forward. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead Victor turned and walked out, his lawyer scrambling behind him. The courtroom emptied gradually after that, but we stayed seated. Emma was quiet, head resting against my mom's shoulder. I finally stood and walked over to them, kneeling beside her. "You were so brave," I said. She nodded but didn't speak. I could see it affecting her now, the weight of what she had done. She hadn't just revealed the truth. She had confronted someone who had spent years teaching her to remain silent. And in doing so, she had changed everything. The moment Victor exited that courtroom under the bailiff's watch, the entire atmosphere transformed, and it felt like someone had opened a window in a room where we'd all been holding our breath. I could finally inhale, not completely relaxed, but enough to remember that I still had a voice and a heartbeat. The judge left the bench shortly after issuing her order. Her expression never changed, but I saw something different in her eyes when she looked at Emma. A quiet recognition. Not sympathy, not surprise. Respect. I gathered our belongings slowly, my fingers trembling slightly as I packed up Emma's bag. She was still curled into my mother's arm, arms exhausted but alert. Her tablet rested beside her on the bench, the screen still dark after the video. I reached for her hand. "Do you want to accompany me?" I asked. She nodded and slid down from the bench. As we exited the courtroom, people observed us. A few glanced away quickly. Others held their stares longer. One woman mouthed the word brave as we passed her outside the courtroom doors. I knelt down to Emma's height. My hands rested gently on her arms. "Are you okay?" She shrugged, then finally said, "I didn't want to do it, but I had to." "I know," I said. "I'm so proud of you. You shouldn't have had to carry that alone." She looked down at the floor. I didn't know if they would believe me. My throat tightened. They did. Because you told the truth. And because you were strong enough to stand up when no one else could. Emma looked up at me, her eyes glistening with quiet tears. "Does this mean I don't have to go back to Dad's house?" I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I could without hurting her. "You're safe. That's what matters." The court officers gave us a few more instructions, including a temporary supervision schedule for Victor. He would be evaluated by a court-appointed counselor before any further access to Emma. It wasn't over. There would be more hearings, more documents, more days in courtrooms that felt like battlegrounds. But the hardest part was behind us. That afternoon, we went straight to my mom's house. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want Emma to go back to our apartment and feel the silence that sometimes echoed too loudly in small spaces. My mom prepared soup even though it was warm outside. She always made soup on emotional days. She said it gave her something to stir when everything else felt out of control. Emma sat at the kitchen table drawing a picture with crayons while I filled out more court paperwork on the couch. At one point, she walked over and handed me what she'd created. It was a picture of two hands holding a heart. Underneath, she wrote in large, uneven letters, "Truth is brave." I cried then. Not the quiet, hidden kind, but the kind that comes from deep inside your chest when the pain has finally found its exit. Emma didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, leaning her head against my arm. That night before bed, we returned to our honesty container. It had been collecting dust for a few weeks. I held it in my lap while Emma sat across from me on her bed. "Do you want to start?" I asked. She shook her head and pointed to the folded note on top. I opened it and read aloud. "What happens when the truth hurts people?" I looked up at her. "Did you write this?" She nodded. Her voice was quiet. "I didn't want to hurt Dad. I just didn't want to be scared anymore." I reached across and took her hand. "The truth can hurt sometimes, but silence hurts more. What you did today didn't hurt anyone. You protected yourself. You protected us. That's not wrong. She stared at the jar for a few seconds, then whispered, I think we should continue doing this. We will, I said. Every night. That night after she fell asleep, I walked into the living room and stood by the window. The streetlights flickered outside. Cars passed. Life continued. But everything within our world had changed. Victor no longer controlled the narrative. He no longer controlled Emma's voice. And for the first time since the divorce, I felt like I could breathe deeply, knowing that I wasn't alone in this struggle anymore. My daughter had stepped into a world far too burdensome for her years. And she didn't just endure it. She transformed it. The final custody hearing occurred 4 weeks after the day Emma stood up in court. By then, everything had changed. The court-appointed counselor who interviewed Victor filed a detailed report. It outlined controlling behavior, emotional instability, and a concerning lack of empathy for Emma's well-being. He denied everything, of course, but the recording spoke louder than any of his words ever could. Combined with Emma's statement, it was enough for the court to remove his unsupervised custody rights. When the judge read her final decision, I sat quietly, holding my breath again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from hope. Full physical and legal custody was granted to me. Victor would have strictly supervised visits twice monthly at a neutral center with trained professionals. There would be no overnight stays, no more closed-door weekends, no more whispered threats. Emma's voice had shattered that illusion forever. We departed the courthouse in silence that day. Emma held my hand as we walked down the long steps outside. My mother walked beside us, her purse swinging against her hip, eyes scanning the sidewalk for Victor, though we knew he wouldn't approach. He hadn't spoken to me since the first hearing. I was content with that. Later that evening, we went to a small diner. Emma loved the one with the red booths and animal-shaped pancakes. She sat across from me and asked, "Is it over now?" I didn't lie. "It's safer now," I said. "We're not done growing through this. But we're not afraid anymore." She nodded and stirred her chocolate milk with her straw. "I'm glad I told." "So am I." There are days I still replay the courtroom in my mind. The way Victor's expression changed when Emma spoke. The way her voice, clear and calm, carried more weight than any legal argument made that day. My daughter reminded me that strength doesn't always come from shouting louder. Sometimes it comes from being brave enough to speak when you're not certain anyone will listen. In the weeks after the final ruling, I started therapy again. Not because I was breaking down, but because I finally had space to process what I had survived. I realized I had spent so long trying to remain afloat that I never learned how to feel secure again. That would require time, but now I had the time. Emma began drawing more. Her sketches changed. They used to be full of houses with no windows and stormy skies. Now she draws trees with roots and kids holding hands. She drew a picture of the honesty container and attached it to her bedroom wall. Every night she reminds me to check it. One night I pulled out a note that said, "Do brave people still get scared?" I smiled and told her yes, they just don't. Let fear be the conclusion of the story. She wrote another one a few days later. "Can kids protect grown-ups too?" I looked at her and said, "You did." I share this narrative because there are women out there right now, sitting in silence, wondering if the truth will ever be sufficient, wondering if anyone will believe them over the person who knows how to perform the right version of themselves in public. I share this narrative because sometimes the truth doesn't come from a lawyer or a courtroom argument. Sometimes it comes from a child who's witnessed more than she should have, and who decides that remaining quiet is no longer an option. I used to think being a good mother meant shielding Emma from everything difficult and painful. Now I understand it means standing beside her through it, teaching her to tell the truth, letting her see me cry, then showing her what it looks like to rise again. We still have our difficult days, but they don't define us. We are not the frightened versions of ourselves that Victor tried to confine us in. We are vocal when we need to be. We are quiet when we choose to be. And we are liberated. Emma rescued us both that day. She didn't just bring the truth into that courtroom. She brought illumination. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was losing her. I felt like I was meeting her for the first time. If you're still here, thank you for listening. This wasn't a simple narrative to share, but I believe stories like this need to be told. Because somewhere out there, another mother is sitting in silence, thinking no one will believe her, and maybe she just needed to hear this. If this story affected you, please appreciate the video, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment. I read them and they signify more than you realize. And if you want to hear more authentic narratives, raw, honest, and full of heart, Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. There's more forthcoming. Thanks again for being here. Stay courageous, stay compassionate, and never forget that the truth matters.